everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Magical Jill, and this is my very first Pokemon video on my channel. I'm really excited about it because I absolutely love Pokemon, and I'm excited to talk about a lot of things that I think are really cool. I want to do top 5s, I want to talk about things that are sadly going away from the series, which is a little bit of what this video is today, and I have some awesome things to talk about with it with my husband, who's here today.
Hello, I am the husband who is here today. And you wanted me to do a lot of the breakdown of the technical and the nitty-gritty, as some would say, of what's actually happening with these eShop shutdowns, but...
Yeah, he's very good at the technical mumbo-jumbo.
Well, yeah, I don't know, I guess I have weird interests, but I thought maybe you could read part of the Q&A from the Nintendo of America website real quick, and then we can kind of talk about what's happening with it.
As of March 27th, 2023, it will no longer be possible to make purchases in Nintendo eShop for the Wii U system and the Nintendo 3DS family of systems. It will also no longer be possible to download free content, including game demos.
Now, it's worth noting that this is true and also not true. If you've already downloaded stuff, at least for the foreseeable future, whatever that means, okay, you can still download it. Mm-hmm. So say that you had a profile and you had downloaded Pokemon Crystal before. Mm-hmm. You can still go back to your download history and re-download that. Or
provided the download history actually works.
Exactly, because we tried to do this with certain things and they didn't all show up. About half of my download history showed up on my profile on the eShop, and the other half was just gone.
It's very worrying, actually.
So they say you can, but I couldn't.
So this video is mostly going to be about Pokemon, as you all know from the title, but I did want to mention that this shutdown is coming just 4 days after we recorded this video, and it will affect a lot of franchises from Animal Crossing to F-Zero, but it will especially have an impact on Pokemon, and that is what we really want to talk about, because there's some really sad things that are going away.
So anyway, if you enjoy the Pokemon content, please be sure to leave a like, let Jill know what you think down below, and we're going to be making more of it in the future, so leave a subscribe too, that actually helps us out a ton. We're trying to grow this channel towards 1,000 subs, so we appreciate your help. So I want to get into the specifics of ways the series is affected and just sort of a checklist for you if you're interested in the next couple of days. I will say that some of these things will be fixable from third-party tools created by fans.
And emulation stuff.
And emulation, and I will talk about that. For legal reasons, even though no one would ever come after us, Jill and I cannot encourage you to go emulate things and go download them if you don't already own them. But legal emulation is a thing. If you already own games backing them up, there's no laws about that. So we'll talk about this a little bit here, because with the 3DS, there are a lot of things going away. This is the most affected platform, with digital versions of Pokemon Red, Blue, Yellow, Gold, Silver, and Crystal no longer being available for purchase. Why does this matter? You know, that might be a question that you ask. These games are decades old at this point. Well, not only are they really great games, still, but these games vary in price in cartridge form, and this was officially the only way to currently buy the games digitally. This could change down the road. They could make it so that these games come back, but...
Or they could put them on the stupid subscription on Switch.
Exactly, that's the thing. Because the Switch relies on a subscription that is using a library of retro titles to bolster the reason to buy it, and it has very, very, very limited selection of anything retro at all for purchase. There's almost nothing on there. Mm-hmm. I highly doubt you would be able to buy the games. If they ever come back on the Switch, my assumption is they would either be remade, like we saw with Diamond and Pearl, or they would be locked to the subscription model.
And just because you have a subscription does not mean that since you downloaded the game that you own the game. It's a lot like how Netflix had The Office for a while and everybody really loved The Office, and now it's not on Netflix anymore, even though people never thought that they'd ever have to buy the DVDs or anything for it. And now you have to subscribe to Peacock if you want to watch it.
Funny name though, so it all worked out in the end. It's also worth noting that these games are available pretty much everywhere on the internet, like we already said, but you know, that's just for emulation. It also adds more barriers to the functionality of the games. So if you just want to play Pokemon Gold, that's it. There is really no downside as a person, hypothetically, if you were just to emulate it. Mm-hmm. But the problem is if you want to have cross functionality, because these versions of Gen 1 and 2 were actually modified before being put on the, on the eShop for the 3DS to work with Pokemon Bank. So this actually allowed players to transfer Gen 1 and 2 Pokemon to Pokemon Bank, and even later to Pokemon Home. There's an entire infrastructure of how that works. Jill can probably show a little picture. It's since changed now that Scarlet and Violet are out as well. But pretty much, Pokemon Home interacts with a lot of different games, and one of the things it interacts with is Pokemon Bank, which we're also going to talk about here in a minute.
And it's really exciting because that means a lot of the rare Pokemon that you spent hundreds of hours trying to get back in the day, you can still play with.
Yes, and especially shinies and things like that, or Pokemon you want to breed. Like, let's say maybe you got a special Raichu when you were playing through Pokemon Leaf Green, and now you want that Raichu to have a son, and you want to take his son on a journey in Pokemon Scarlet. Well, you only have a limited amount of time to still have access to getting those features for the future, basically 4 days officially.
Otherwise, all of your Pokemon are just locked onto those places that they're on, and you can't move them.
Yeah, if you never get Bank, this is going to be the big one we're going to talk about. So Bank will no longer be available for download unless previously downloaded. Again, like we said before, if it shows up in your download history. When I went to my download history, I had downloaded Bank. This one did show up, but other things I had downloaded before didn't. So I don't know what your experience will be with that. This is going to be one of the biggest changes to the Pokemon infrastructure that will hurt the franchise for older fans who still enjoy playing previous generations. It absolutely will. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So without Bank, you can't use official tools, and I'm talking Nintendo and Game Freak sanctioned official tools, to move Pokemon from earlier generations onward.
And the problem with that is Pokemon Bank has special links to certain eShop things like Poke Transporter that you can't just search up in the eShop. You have to go into the app to click on it, and in order to do that you have to pay to use the app. But then they say, oh, the app will be free after the shutdown, but you won't be able to download Poke Transporter.
Well, we don't know. That's the problem. That's something I wanted to talk to you about with that.
It's assumed that you probably won't be able to.
But nobody knows, because everybody's arguing about that online with Poke Transporter, which that brings me to Poke Transporter, which I'm glad you brought up because I do want to talk about it. You're not wrong, but you're also not right, because we don't fully know if Poke Transporter is still going to be available for download. We just don't know. Because to clarify what you said, which you are correct on, Pokemon Bank is going to become free. You still had to have downloaded it, though. So if you didn't download it, it doesn't matter that Pokemon Bank is free, you can't get it anymore. You need to have downloaded it at least once. It's just the membership for Pokemon Bank requirement is going away. So pretend there was never a membership. You still need to have downloaded that at some point. The problem is, like you said, there are links directly from Bank to download things like Pokemon Transporter, and there is no other official way to get Pokemon Transporter. Now, here's the problem with that. That puts a limit on what you can do with Pokemon transferring. You could transfer them from Gen 3 to Gen 4, then to Gen 5, so we're talking all the way from back on the Game Boy Advance to all the way up to Black and White 1 and 2. So that is through a few, generations of Pokemon. But after Black and White 2, you can't move them up anymore if you don't have Transporter. I didn't know this, but Transporter is also needed to interact with the Gen 1 and 2 eShop versions. It's not just compatible with Bank, it has to also work with Transporter. So pretty much, if you don't get Transporter, and you have Bank only, and let's say you could never get Transporter in the future, you would pretty much only be able to move things from the 3DS era of Pokemon up to the Switch era. Whereas if you had Transporter and Bank, you could move something all the way from Fire Red up to basically Scarlet.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
Provided the Pokemon is actually in Scarlet, because they got rid of the national Pokedex.
Yeah, they've been kind of adding back into it a lot too, so there's some weird compatibility things, but overall it's become a lot better. When Sword and Shield released, it was terrible. There was basically no cross functionality, but since then it's been fixed a lot.
Good.
Just not fully. Especially with Diamond and Pearl coming out, really helping bolster that dex. Now, here's the thing. It will still be possible to transfer your Pokemon, okay? It will still be possible, because there's always people who say, well, no, there's all these tools. Yes, there are fan-made tools that are being worked on right now. That's custom software that's being developed by Pokemon fans in order to actually do this. And there's nothing wrong with custom software. In fact, custom software is awesome. But the problem is the official way to do these things will be gone unless you already downloaded these apps. And I'm sorry, but even though we are adults who love these games, and there's millions of adults who love these games, this is going to completely lock out most kids from ever moving old Pokemon up to new games.
That's so sad.
So if there's any younger kids who like really like older games, which believe it or not do exist, those kids do exist, and they're smart.
Usually because their parents told them to get into older games.
Yeah, that's true, because their parents are smart too. Those people are not going to be able to move things up to later generations. That's just how it is, because they're not going to be mentally developed enough, and their parents are probably not going to be involved enough in most cases to go download special software for their 3DS and basically, I don't want to say crack, but basically unlock their 3DS to play homebrew and custom software. That's just not going to happen. So a lot of people are just not going to have access to doing this. Now you, the viewer, because you're interested in this topic, you probably are informed enough to do it, but it's still another hurdle that you have to go through. It's still another time sink that you have to go through that you wouldn't have to go through if this wasn't being taken away. But this is going to make it so you can't transfer anything if you don't have that unless you go download custom software, and that sucks. This is going to really this is going to really hurt some people's enjoyment of Pokemon, I think.
I definitely agree, because there's a lot of people who have spent a long time getting special Pokemon and training them up in a special way on some of the older games. I want to be able to bring them up to the newer games because they really like those Pokemon a lot. And it's just kind of a shame that a lot of times after this shutdown, those Pokemon are just going to be locked to their system.
Yeah, they're pretty much just going to be unobtainable in newer things without special software or without cheat devices. Which, again, I don't care if you use them. It doesn't matter to me. But
I think Game Freak cares.
Well, it's unfortunate that you'd ever have to.
Yes.
And that's kind of my problem with it. I also want to mention something I didn't write down on here, which is a special Pokemon that's going to be unavailable. So the demos, the special demos of Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, Sun and Moon are no longer going to be available to get off of the eShop. You might think, why does that matter? I own those games. Well, there were some special Pokemon and items and different things that you could get from those demos that are no longer available.
And they were only in the demos.
Right. So, like, Jill, what was one we took a look at the other day?
Ash Greninja.
Exactly. That's from the Sun and Moon demos.
Yeah, it was a special Greninja that had Battle Bond, and he became the Ash Greninja, and it's really cool. And when you played the demo, at the very end of the demo, you got the ability to transfer him into the full version of the game. But if you never played the demo, you would never be able to do that. And also there are some special items and stuff too that you could get in the demo and then transfer them up to the official game. None of those were super rare or important. It's mostly the Ash Greninja that's the biggest problem because he is not in any of the other games. That is the only way to get that one specific Pokemon.
Yeah, and with that too, it's also not going to be the same unless something changes on modern hardware. Ash Greninja was special because not only did it have special abilities, but it also looked special too. And now you're not going to see that on modern hardware unless they do end up coding that in, because even though there are some leaks regarding Battle Bond and possible compatibility with Ash Greninja, there's no compatibility discovered yet with his special look. And the ability Battle Bond itself was actually changed in this last generation. So it's not the same as it was.
What did they change it to?
It's not necessarily just a form change thing anymore. It now is an ability that can exist separately from that. So because of that, if they do move Ash Greninja over, I'm not sure how that will work with the changes they made to Battle Bond. You know, like this Battle Bond's one of the ones I would personally leave on the 3DS. Like I would go get him and leave him on your 3DS era to play around with personally, because we know for sure that he's going to have that look and that ability, and it's really neat.
And he's gonna work.
And his original trainer is listed as Ash, which I think is cool.
And if they ever did bring the specific Ash Greninja up, they'd probably make it stupid event-based, and you'd only be able to get it for 1 month and 3-star Terra Raids or whatever.
Yeah, probably like 10-star Terra Raids. They're just gonna upgrade it.
And it would be ridiculous, and a lot of people would miss out on it, and then people would sell their extras on eBay for like $10,000.
Oh, look, people already do that. Well, yeah, so that's something that's going to be gone too. Also, Pokemon Dream Radar. This one is not as big of a focus for me, but I still thought it would be something I should mention. This was an AR experience. It's about $3, I believe, on the American eShop for the 3DS, and it let players actually capture some rare Pokemon, transfer them to Black and White 2. That included the Therian forms of the Genie Pokemon.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so Thundurus, Landorus, and Tornadus, or Tornadus, I've never known how to say his name, in Pokemon Black and White 2, this is the way to get them.
That's really sad that special versions of certain Pokemon are just going away at all. It bothers me. I feel like they should have been able to have ways to get all of the Pokemon that have ever existed in the newer games. I know that's probably a lot to ask for since there's just so many of them, but it makes me really upset to know that they're locking people out of things, especially younger people. Because, you know, if you're a young kid right now, and you really, really love Pokemon, but you don't have the money to buy a bunch of stuff off of the eShop, you probably don't have, you know, tons and tons of time in the world or money in the world to be able to go like on eBay and buy some of the special Pokemon that you missed out on events from because they were probably, you know, during a time when you either weren't into Pokemon or you might not have even been born then.
Well,
right?
Also, whose parents would let them? I mean, if my kid came to me and said, Dad, I need to buy a Mewtwo off of eBay, I'm going to think that's a scam.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, I know that there are people who distribute those things that are not scams, but for the most part, if I'm just an average dad, I'm going to be like, what are you talking about?
It makes me sad that they're locking out so many different types of people who may not financially be able to get all of these special Pokemon in time.
Well, and people like us, I have a Action Replay, which is a cheat device for the DS era, so we can always go back and get the DS era event Pokemon if we really wanted to. You just put it in, you insert a certain code, and it unlocks the event ticket for you, and then you can go to that island or whatever and catch them.
But there's no way to do that in like Scarlet and Violet or Sword and Shield.
No, and also those things only work on certain hardware, so like that wouldn't work for 3DS games. You'd have to buy a 3DS one. And personally, I would expect those to actually rise in price over the years now after the eShop shuts down.
That's true.
Especially after online functionality goes away in the future. When you can no longer trade or something, those things are going to be expensive because the hobbyists who are still super into those old games are going to be willing to pay for it. Kind of like you see with Pokemon Coliseum and XD. It's now such a niche product on the GameCube that people who are going to buy it are willing to pay.
And people who don't care about these games love to profit off of collectors.
Yes. So that unfortunately happens quite a bit. So that's kind of the 3DS side of things. I mean, there is one more thing. I don't know if people care. I thought it was cool, but the special Pokemon themes from the theme shop, those are no longer going to be available.
Almost all of the themes actually aren't going to be available, right?
That's true.
If you haven't downloaded them before anyway, and a lot of them are paid for. There's some cool free ones, but a lot of them are paid for, and it's kind of a shame. I got the Eevee one with like the little picture of Sylveon, and it's like kind of pink, and I got some other Eevee ones and some other Pokemon ones, and I think they're really cute. I'm really excited about them, and they play special music on the home screen, so I really recommend checking those out before the eShop shut down, because I honestly think it's not fair if you have no idea about any of this and then it just goes away forever and you didn't get the chance to even at least consider getting any of it.
Yeah, it's going to be very frustrating, basically, because that stuff's just going to be gone.
And I know a lot of people are really big Pokemon fans, just like we are, and it would be a big shame to know that there's a lot of people out there who didn't at least get to experience some of the stuff on the 3DS before it went away.
The Wii U is a lot simpler. There's much less, and I'm just going to roll through them really quick. Pokemon Rumble U will no longer be available at all. This was exclusive. This was digitally exclusive.
What was Pokemon Rumble U?
This is sort of like an arena battle game, and it actually interacted with little NFC figures you could buy that are now being price gouged online. They're kind of cute.
Oh, they're kind of like amiibos.
They're kind of like amiibos, yeah. I personally am not the hugest fan of this game, but it's still a Pokemon game. It's still sad. I mean, like, I don't want to act like it doesn't matter, but I'm just saying, like, out of all the things we talked about, this to me is the least big deal.
That's probably true, yeah.
But it's still a side Pokemon game that's going away. And that just sucks in general. And just because I don't care that much about Pokemon Rumble U doesn't mean someone doesn't. So that is unfortunate. Also, the DS emulation Pokemon games, like Pokemon Ranger titles or Mystery Dungeon, are no longer going to be available. Those were on the eShop on the Wii U. There are a lot of ways to turn your Wii U into an emulation machine and download these things in various places, But this was the easiest official way to get them, and it was a fun, easy way to play Pokemon Ranger and Mystery Dungeon games on your TV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was especially easy because all you had to do was buy it and then just load up the game and it was already doing it for you. You didn't have to set up anything special.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of the problem. I mean, like, again, it's all going to be about the effort you're willing to put in. My point is just you shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
You know, you shouldn't have to put that effort in because these things should be preserved by these companies.
We've also seen multiple articles of people spending thousands upon thousands of dollars on the eShop in preparation of its shutting down. And you'd think that alone would have been enough for Nintendo to be like, oh, maybe we should just leave this up for a couple more years at least.
Well, kind of like what you said with the PS3. That happened.
Yeah,
remember?
That's true.
Like, people spent so much money and got so mad that the PS3 store didn't shut down.
Yeah, and I feel like for Nintendo, it's not only bad for business, but it's bad for their brand to get rid of some of their Pokemon side games when Pokemon is borderline one of their biggest franchises.
Yeah, and it also gets into some things of, like, I don't know, the tinfoil hat side of me feels like after the way that Scarlet and Violet ran and just some of the mistakes with Sword and Shield, that maybe it's in their best interest as well to cover up the past of this franchise, which was really well optimized, and not show you that.
Uh-oh.
I don't know, but it's unfortunate that they've gone down that road. Again, the last thing I wanted to mention, I'm sure there are more, but this is already a long video, is Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire. This game is a cartridge, $40 to $50 if it doesn't look like your dog took it apart and chewed it up. There are some that look like they've been through World War II, and I don't understand how that happened. Those ones are cheaper. But if you want a cartridge that looks like it actually is a Game Boy cartridge, that's going to be $40 to $50 in America. On the eShop, it's very cheap. I believe it was $8 to buy.
Yeah, and speaking of that, that is one of the biggest problems with the eShop shutting down, is there are a lot of Pokemon games, specifically Emerald that comes to mind, that are so expensive to get the physical version of. And once the eShop shuts down, that's pretty much going to be the only way to play them unless you do emulation.
Right, and Emerald you can't even buy on the eShop already. That's one reason why it's so much. So now I'm sure the prices will rise again for things like Crystal.
Yeah.
You know, or gold or silver or whatever. And again, you know, I do think that sometimes when you talk about this stuff, people will say, like, you're complaining because it affects you. I'm complaining because it affects everybody. I have a boxed version of Pokemon Silver. If Pokemon Silver goes away, that's not going to affect me. I own these games digitally.
But it affects a lot of Pokemon fans who care.
Right, exactly. And that's why it bothers me, is it's like, I always see this on my own channel where people will be like, well, you're complaining because you can't afford it, or you're complaining because of this. It's like, no, shilling for the company does nothing here. This is just bad. Mm-hmm. This is going to affect a lot of people who are not in as good of a position as me, and I already don't have much money at all, who can't get these things, who, like, a $250 cartridge of Pokemon Emerald is outside of their price range, and they now just don't get to enjoy that game
ever.
And all this does is encourage emulation without owning the game. Like, what this stuff does is it encourages you to, instead of back up your games and legally emulate them, it encourages you to just go to a website and download a $300 game for $0. This is what this encourages you to do.
And sadly, because emulation is fan-made and so new, there isn't really a ton of optimization on it yet, so there's some laggy things that still happen, or sometimes there's a glitch or two.
Yeah.
And it'll get better over time, but right now it's not in a perfect state at all.
Right, so like 3DS emulation is not very good when we record this. Game Boy Advance and below emulation is great. DS is pretty good, but also it's not the same. Like, it's just not the same to play a DS game
not
with
on
a
your
mouse
DS.
on
Yeah.
your computer screen.
Yeah.
That's not the same as holding a stylus and stuff. And I don't even mean that out of nostalgia. I mean out of the mechanics of how those games were made. They were made for you to be holding a stylus.
Yeah.
So that's also the problem, is emulations become more complicated, and some of these things are going to become more complicated, especially with the DS and the 3DS. Those are very unique systems designed for 2 screens. That's pretty unheard of in gaming. That's not normal. And so with something like Pokemon Emerald, you emulating it on your computer is pretty much the exact same experience. In fact, it would run better. You emulating something like Pokemon Ultra Moon, it will not run better. At least not in 2023, it sure won't.
I think that's the biggest shame, is Nintendo seems to be isolating and alienating its older fans of the franchise. And would rather push more towards the newer fans of the franchise, and I think that's just a really big shame because it kind of feels
disrespectful.
Yeah, it feels very disrespectful.
Yeah, and I think that unfortunately this is just a new thing in entertainment. I mean, we see this with all the reboots, we see this with all of the like, your time is gone, old man, this is our Star Wars, or your time is gone, this is our Star Trek. It's like, this is our Pokemon. It's like, instead of doing both, cultivating new fan bases and bringing the old with, it's almost like, well, we know there's going to be enough built-in people that won't complain and will just buy it anyway, that we can do whatever we want. Mm-hmm. That's what this whole thing comes off to me, because I don't think a single one of these could be argued as a positive for Pokemon, even if you don't care about them.
I don't think most things about the eShop shutting down are a positive at all for the entire Nintendo brand. It just makes them look bad. It makes them look like they can't spend the extra minuscule amount of money it is to them to keep these servers open, because they are a multi-billion-dollar company, and they could very much so afford to keep the eShop for Wii U and 3DS open for at least 10 more years.
It's just very unfortunate, and, to speak to that really quick, they didn't even give Emulation time to catch up.
That's true.
And I know they don't care about that, but if this shut down after Emulation was at a point where 3DS games were better, it
would be less of a big deal.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, they could have made Emulation better by bringing up some of these games to their newer software.
Oh yeah,
and not having it be stupid subscription based.
Well, again, like, even how they showed with the gamepad that you could play with the gamepad and the TV at the same time, they could have released a version of the Switch or an update for the Switch that allowed you to use the, emulate DS games on it or 3DS games on it, because it's more than powerful enough. Mm-hmm. It's just that the way they've made it, you can't use it on the TV while it's also in your hands.
And they could have made it so it could do that, especially with like a wire or something if they really had to.
The Wii U can do it.
Yeah, and it'd be really cool.
Yeah, so I think there's just not really a focus on these old things, which is unfortunate, because old doesn't mean bad. And that's kind of what we wanted to get at here.
Old usually means the basis of your fan base that created what you are today.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter, because now only new people matter.
Oh, that makes sense.
Old thing bad.
That makes sense.
What is it? Forget the past. Kill it if you have to.
It just reminds me a lot of like Monster High. Yeah. And how they don't really give a shit about G1 anymore. And how they only release a G1 thing every once in a while just because. Mm-hmm. And because they want money, obviously.
Yeah, from collectors. Mm-hmm. But don't say that, because clearly G1 is not aimed at collectors, as the Mattel shills in your comments have told you.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So, I don't know. I mean, being jobless is, I guess, a thing now.
I can make an entire video about how much I dislike corporate shills so much. I hate corporate so much, and it makes me sad that so many amazing things from amazing artists have been pushed out by corporate companies.
I don't even care about that. I just care about the people jumping in front of bullets for them, because corporations will always, like, these things would not exist without the corporations.
No, that's true, but what I mean is, like, the fact that they often run it in such a
corporatized way.
Yeah, in a disrespectful way, like taking away art from the eShop.
Yeah, I agree. I think that where it becomes a problem to me is where it's corporatized. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think the big problem is. Cosmo is like going nuts in his little box back there, so maybe we should wrap it up. Jill, you want to do your outro? Talk about some of the things that you also do on this channel before we go?
I wanted to say thank you all for watching. My husband loves to talk about video games and all this kind of stuff on his channel, and I thought it was really inspiring and exciting to do on my channel because I really love Pokemon, and I thought that it was kind of adjacent to some of the things that I like to talk about, like Sailor Moon and hopefully other animes in the future, and I also really love talking about Monster High dolls, so I hope you guys are willing to check out the rest of my videos because I think they're all really high quality and really cool. And speaking of high quality, I actually have a website called EnchantedGlamour.com, which is EnchantedGlamor.com, or you could go to MagicalJill.com, and I make some really cool jewelry. I make some really cool resin pieces like coasters and ashtrays and other such things. I'm actually working on making some resin pieces that will become jewelry, which is really cool. I was going to make a collection that was very much so inspired by Sailor Moon. I was going to make some other really cool collections that are inspired by animals. So I'm I'm really excited for you guys to go check all of that stuff out on my website because it's really cool. So if you guys liked this video, please subscribe and leave a comment down below talking about what some of your favorite things about Pokemon are, what you're sad about might be going away, whether it's the Ash Greninja, or if you're sad that maybe Pokemon Crystal is going away and you weren't able to buy it, or stuff like that. Just let me know, because I like talking to you guys about this sort of stuff, and I like getting those conversations started.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for joining us. We appreciate you very much, and have a great day.